Padmaja, can I start?
Yes, you may start.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namaste, everyone. I'm Chandra from International Institute of Vedic Sciences. I welcome everyone to this live session today. This marks halfway through the 108 sessions that we have set as a target. This is the 54th session. We'll start with the start prayer. Harihi Om. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha, Shuklam Bharadaram Vishnum, Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam, Prasanna Vadanam Dhyayet, Sarva Vignopashantaye, Narayanam Namaskritya, Naram Chaiva Narottamam, Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudirayet. Today we have with us Shri Bal Ram Singh ji. I'm going to take a few minutes to introduce him. Shri Bal Ram Singh ji has been a professor since 1990 and a Henry Dreyfus Teacher-scholar since 1997 at UMass Dartmouth and at the Institute of Advanced Sciences. He is also Adjunct Professor at School of Sanskrit and Indic Studies, JNU, India. He has been a visiting professor at Georgetown University, Harvard Medical College, Angming University, and JNU as well. He is currently the president of Institute of Advanced Sciences and also founder of Prime Bio Inclusion, a biotechnology company. Dr. Singh is the founding director of Botulinum Research Center, established in 2003 and currently located at INADS. He is also the founding director of the Center for Indic Studies at the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth. He is currently adjunct professor at the School of Sanskrit and Indic Studies. He published 14 books and over 325 articles, including articles related to India's philosophy and tradition. He is also the editor and associate editor of 4 journals. He does a lot of talks on Indian philosophy and Ramayana and a lot of other things. And today he is here to share with us scientific approach and sciences in our Vedic literature. With that, Dr. Balramji, I hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Chandran. Thank you very much to Gadadharji, who has been in touch in making this happen. I'm so pleased to be here. I'm going to share my slides, if that is okay with you. And we take it from there. So it's always a pleasure to talk about the scientific approach and science in Vedic literature, because it's something that is generally claimed by the many traditional Indian scholars and generally questioned by mostly modern scientific scholars. So this is a good way to have a discussion on, because I happen to be, of course, from India, and I have been most of my professional life I have been here actually in United States more longer than I've been in India. So it's a great opportunity for me to be able to sometimes work on both sides and sometimes reconcile, sometimes recalibrate as to how to present all these things. So I think with those aims, I would like to begin. One of the things that I want to present is that Indian literature have been tremendous. And there are many reasons for that. One of them is diverse views are allowed, and today's world looks at diversity as one of the major goal of not only human beings, but also to whole entire planet, perhaps entire universe. We are in the process of preserving the diversity. And so what you see in Indian literature, especially Hindu literature, is humongous number of literature, texts, views, and even those which have been preserved. There are probably a lot more that have been lost. So where they divide them into different ways. Sometimes they divide into Astic and Gnostic, and sometimes they divide into Agam and Nigam, and Vedas and different kind of other nomenclatures. It's really not that important from scientific perspective. It's just that there is a huge body of literature, and this is just an example of something that I get it on internet. But the thing that I want to focus on is the way the knowledge and information works. And this is true for irrespective of the field. There is a deductive way of learning and there is inductive way of learning. Inductive way of learning is top down, basically, that you have a theory or some idea, some diktat, some rules, some prescriptions, and then that you build into some hypothesis and try to make some observations and confirm that that is the case. Whereas deductive knowledge is something that you see the information, you look at the pattern, and then you build some hypothesis and then theory. So the two types of literature that I'm just going to refer just because of convenience of trying to create some scientific framework here. So you have the Nigamas, which are more like Vedic, and there are a lot of Vedic literature. There are suktas, there are slokas, there are ideas that have been presented in Vedas, and they are considered pramanas. And from there, everything comes into hypothesis. You can make observations. You can try to confirm that how that all fit. Whereas this agamas are more indigenous, local, bottoms up type of things, where various types of people have observations, their lives, maybe individuals, maybe a group, and that information gets collated into some pattern, and then they build some hypothesis and then come up with the theory. Many times these things intermingle. They are not like one way or the other, although sometimes practitioners tend to hold on to their particular way of doing it. Maybe at the individual level that may be even true or perhaps more appropriate. But when it becomes into a group and becomes into a society and then becomes in a country or even the world, that becomes a little bit a problem, because that is almost impossible from science perspective. But this is two ways to go and two ways to learn. And once we know this, then we can put whether it's, I'm talking about material science that I am more involved, or we're talking about social science that, or human science that most of the traditions have, either they call it a knowledge system like Vedas, or they call it religion that many people have throughout the world and throughout the history. So I want to give you some sense of this. These scriptures and texts, they are written in many manuscripts and books. And then you have, there are catalogs of these books. And there are catalogs of these catalogs. This is how this information in library system today is managed. And that refers to culture and tradition of a particular society, or this world that we have today. And what we have today is India has the largest catalogs of catalog, which just confirms what I just said earlier. It has from library point of view, it has largest catalogs of catalogs, which means it's really huge number of manuscripts, huge number of scriptures and texts have been written, and then they have been collated. I would say even 50% probably not documented. So that just shows the diversity of the culture. So you look at because they tend to look at the nature and prakriti. And then there are a lot of indigenous, when I say Swadeshi, I don't mean the country here. I mean, people in a particular area, area of space. And then they have a lot of anveshan, which will translate into some kind of research or discoveries. And then you do punarveshan, which is real research. But first one is more like a discovery, or you're finding it out sometimes, making observations. And then you make them, you organize them. Vyavasthitikaran. It means in Sanskrit, it means to organize, to make a system. That's such a like scientific, eventually when you organize all this information, then it becomes more like a scientific. And then when you express it, that's something like I'm trying to do, my own way of explaining it, and that's called abhivekti. And then many times these get translated by others. I'm translating much of the science into trying to make it like how the Hindu scriptures or literature might be connected to like science. The same way people do these translations in different ways, which also could include language. Sometimes people just don't know the language, so they translate that. And that is how the scientific culture is evolved. And it's true for everywhere. The one interesting thing is about India, which is very important for us to know, that India is a very ancient country and is very unique. One of its uniqueness is this is the only subcontinent, Indian subcontinent. Basically, there's only one subcontinent present in the world. And Indian subcontinent it has a very unique history. It actually 70 million plus million years ago, it was part of African continent. And then it became slowly moved this mass of land, moved into and slammed into Asian continent. Well, that's really, we would say just a piece of land. What's a big deal about it? No, actually, it's a big deal about it because this slamming built this Himalayas. And Himalayas becomes a very important geographical structure that then defines what happens beyond the Himalayas. Because every several thousand, maybe 100,000 years or so, there is something called major ice age happens. And there are mini ice ages also happen. And that ice age basically means there is the cold air that comes from the north. And most of the world, at least Europe, more than half of the world becomes very, very cold place and not inhabitable. And so many people either migrate or, bear survival. And there is not really that much of thinking and knowledge. Whereas India, because of this, because of the Himalayas, has maintained its weather more tolerable to human beings. And that's why they have kept thinking, not just the survival, but also kept thinking. And that has an implication on this production of knowledge and literature. Also because this cycle is not affecting India. So India has continued its civilization. And that also is very important for this diversification or diversity in the literature as well as in people. And there are so many fields that are very important, but they are no different. Like I said, so many literature, so many ways to look at things, all kind of darshanas, all kind of Vedas and Upvedas and Upangas, all this kind of things. They ultimately refer to the same situation, just trying to understand knowledge, just very similar to what we have today in the world, in academic world, where you have engineering, chemistry, physics, math, and there are all kind of the various aspects connecting with each other and eventually try to find some solution to the problems, rightly or wrongly, but nevertheless, that's the process. So what is science? Science has been, how it has been organized by the definition. One of them I just told earlier, systematic is a study of a topic, subject, or problem, and then which gives you consistent results. That's a 8th grade definition of science, very basic one. But then there is a scientific truth, which means it must be true, not just organized. And then you have to, for something to be true, you have to try to falsify. Why could it be wrong? And there is a huge process in Indian literature how to go after the truth. They have all kind of arguments, counter arguments, experiments, and things like that in various things. And then there is currently the objective science is what is considered science, and not the subjective one. Although the Indian thing is a little bit different because there could be subjective science and there is a condition by which you can be a subjective science, because the purpose of objective science is being unbiased. So local lifestyle, like I said, is very important. situation or context is very important for us to understand. Like about India, I gave you some idea about that. And where to where within, whenever you're trying to make some observation, or when did you make this observation, is also very important. And so to create this unbiasedness, Indians have figured out this yoga and meditation, which will come in the nigams and agams. It will come more in agam, because that's something people have developed themselves, and this is more like a way that bottoms up people have been able to think through themselves. And they have created whole literature and the purpose of this. And the freedom, independence, equality is something that is natural. But by practicing yoga, you are able to train yourself. For example, yoga chitta vritti nirodha. You have understanding of self by stopping or controlling or making your mind. Chitta vritti means, I'm here loosely interpreting as mind, and how to be able to have the mind not wander around. Then only you can study yourself and become yourself. So that is very important. Swadhyaya is very important. Sapa, tapa, swadhyaya, Iswara pranidhanani, kriya yoga. When you do something, then you have to take some trouble, which is tapa, and then you study yourself. And then only you can get to this level of Iswara pranidhanani. This is not, I will tell you later, it's not really God. Iswar is something that is very achievable, at least from this perspective. And then once you are able to get, then you know Swadharma, what you really are, and then you have the independence. You do not get independence by declaration of it, but you get independence because you know who you are. And then for that, Swadharme nidhanam shreya, Pardharmo bhayavaha. This is in Bhagavad Gita. It says that living by your own dharma is the ultimate goal. That is the Shreyas goal of life. And then you also can have natural action. So karma without attachment, which is the real freedom. And then if you stay in yourself, and that's swas, that is health. So these are the definitions coming from bottoms up, where people have been able to practice, and then they can meet their goals. Then things have been written now from Nigam point of view. Then you have Bhagavad Gita, which says this, but it is based on that observations. Karmande vadikaraste ma phalesu kadachan. Because once you set up the goal, then you should be able to follow by action, and then whatever happens to you, they accept, because you are already familiar with what you are and where things are. And so the idea of kartabya is a supreme, and that's all you can do, is follow the kartabya, and then be able to realize this diktat of karmande vadikaraste ma phalesu kadachan, which is very often quoted for people to invoke behaviors in them. And that is, once you have this level of unbiasedness, then you are able to look at the science even subjectively. And that's the point I wanted to make here, that individually, at the individual level, you can look at the things subjectively. The system of science that we have created today, because we do not trust people to be unbiased, so we say only objective. And there are a lot of studies that people are still biased despite being objective, because just the nature of information that is available or that you're dealing with. So you have to create this sakshi bhav. Gatir bharta prabhu sakshi nimasa saranam surhat. And then under many conditions, prabhava, pralaya, sthanam, nidhanam, bijam, mabhyam, in every situation, from beginning to end, you must act as a sakshi, which means again, detached and without being affected by that. And that's the fundamental definition of science that needs to be invoked in today's world, and that we do not have currently. Although we are getting there, there is a yoga is being recognized, and people are more and more trying to get into that direction. So I said that Iswara is you, not God. I earlier said it's science, not religion. So it's Patanjali Yoga Sutra says, that Iswara is untouched by klesa, rag and dves, attachment and aversion, and karmphala, which is the papa and punya, which is loss and profit. So Iswar definition that Patanjali Yoga Sutra gives is actually somebody who is not affected, which is unbiased. So you can reach the level of Ishvara to become a scientist. When somebody, Ishvara is really truly a scientist, in my opinion. Not that I'm scientist by designation. I'm not Ishvara. I have to reach to that level to become Ishvara. And then you become unbiased or detached, and then you will be able to do that. Contrary to that, and this is just one example, the Western world believes in the week. That week today is Sunday, and people do certain things certain ways for those 7 days. There is no natural way to consider 7 days, although you can use it for, we have Ravivar, Somwar, Mangalwar, and then you have Mangalwar is Hanumanji, and Somwar is Chandra, and Ravivar is Shuri, all kinds of Shanivar is Shanideo, all this kind of thing, Sukra, all that thing is there, but actually there is no real region, there is no natural region, and this is just a diktat of a religion, where the Old Testament says basically that this world was created in 6 days, and seventh day the God took rest. And so we have the 7 days, and everybody kind of follows that. That's very different. That is the top-down way of looking at what your deductive knowledge, where somebody just tells you something and then you just follow, and looks like good idea, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I'm sorry that what I want to say, this is reflected in Indian Constitution also, that very important for us to know. And if that's the only country in India which is in the Constitution, it says the fundamental duties, it shall be the duty of every citizen of India to develop scientific temper, humanism, and the spirit of inquiry and reform, which means you can, anything and everything can be questioned. There is nothing that something like has been dictated and you cannot question that, and you can question it and you can follow, and as a duty, not as a right, but as a duty, because the duty is kartabya. You have to do the kartabya, then people even accept it, because if I as a scientist am performing my duty to show what I know is the truth, I think people are more likely to believe it. Compared to that, what is modern science? This is a book written by Werner Heisenberg, who got Nobel Prize for his hypothesis of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. He wrote a book, Philosophy and Physics, where they talk about the conflict, how the cultural conflict with science might appear, and says the instruments of modern science derive from this theory. You remember that theory starts from the top in deductive knowledge, and require a comprehension of that theory for their correct use. So you have to know where that is coming from. This theory rests on philosophical as well as physical assumptions. And the interesting thing is that when comprehended, these philosophical assumptions generate a personal and social mentality and behavior quite different from all at points incompatible with the family, caste, tribally centered mentality of native Asian, Middle Eastern, African people. So the science that we have, modern science, this is written by a professor of philosophy from Yale University. What we have modern science, unless it is integrated by the local traditions and observations and other things as a part of it, this is going to be incompatibility, and many times that is a problem with the science. So it's not like science, everything is scientific, and science is such a great idea. It is a great idea because from where it is being practiced, and the goal of it is, but what is really done that way or not, that's always a question, and that one should be familiar with that. And so result comes out, literature is reflection of society or vice versa. So that you have, this is supposed to be culture, people, and scientific analysis, and then there are people who bring those kind of ideas to the world today. Karl Marx a couple hundred years ago, and Samuel Huntington a couple of decades ago. Samuel Huntington being a professor of religion in and I think. Hey, 1 second, I'm talking. So I'm sorry about that. There's some home intervention. So, I think the literature is reflected by Karl Marx, who many people, the Marxist people, think about economics being the major thing, and they think there's very scientific analysis of Karl Marx. And Samuel Huntington, who wrote The Clash of Civilization, also he thinks religion is very important, and that is all the East versus West, and many other points are reflected. But we have to remember that this is philosophy here, and that's very important to understand that philosophy determines many of the sciences also. So from Indian perspective, this is, everything is based on consciousness, the physical sciences, mathematics, social sciences, life sciences, arts and aesthetics, all kind of things are applied to really understand the consciousness, and it should be, the arrow should be on the other side also. Everything comes from there. And one experimental science that has been done in modern times, published in Proceedings of National Academy of Science, where people started looking at what is God, the beliefs in God. And they asked, this is in America, this work was done, and they asked the question whether on some moral issues like euthanasia, homosexuality, the capital punishment, and things like that. There were 10 questions like that, and they asked Americans whether their values versus typical American values, and they didn't ask them to answer the question, they recorded them in the brain. And they found that if you see two spots, that means there is a difference between self and a typical American. And then also they asked the question whether God's values are, how different they are from typical American. They actually find more difference. But when it comes to what is your value versus what is God's value, there is no difference. So everybody thinks that they are, this is not, they don't know anything about Vedas. They don't know anything about Indian scripture. They're just typical Americans. But what you see here is the concept of Aham Brahmasmi. Every individual thinks they are closest to God. Their values, their views are exactly the same as God. And that's again the indication of the diversity, that every individual is diverse. It's very difficult to ask them to have the same. But here we are using a scientific tool to prove that every individual is different. So that's the same as it has been said in the Upanishads. Another Nobel laureate, Erwin Schrödinger, who wrote in his book in 1964 that from early Upanishads, the recognition of Atman is Brahman, it was in Indian thought considered far from being blasphemous. It was considered very bad here. You cannot consider yourself to be God, but not in India. In India, it is very true. And then you look at the science, and that science today, the purpose of science was not to prove anything about Indian Upanishads or anything, Atman and Brahman. They just did this study to find out what people think. But the conclusion is very similar, or very much applicable to what will be known in Vedanta and Upanishads. So this world has to be approached from all kinds of fields, because there are so many bridges to be built, and saying that I know the truth and only this person knows the truth, then we will have only our truths, which is important for our individual level, but not for common understanding. So just like in material science, we have physics, chemistry, and biology. I happen to be chemist, and this is not a diagram that I made, it's made by somebody else, but the chemistry is the bridge between physics and biology as an example. So will be there many other things. Language is very important. Chemistry is kind of a language. And there is a language in Indian system, the standard language is considered as a Sanskrit. And there is a physics of that speech, how we speak, how the 52 letters are there, and how the consonants and vowels, and how the Panchakshari works. There is all huge amount of science involved in that. I wouldn't go in detail, except that just to reflect that there is a physics involved in that. And then there is a biology, because all these, the micro pressures around our oral cavity have effect on our nerves. And then we are affected by those, what we become. So whatever language we speak, even that has an effect on us. and the language has a roots in the local culture and local environment. And that has a huge impact. Like I said, there are cranial nerves, and they're all related to in our facial area, and that have effects. And so yogic mantras, for example, they stimulate secretions of pituitary gland, which is located only millimeters from the palate. These secretions strengthen our immune and neurological systems, protecting us from diseases in the and negative emotions. Is a paper that was published in 2004. It's, it may be even relevant today in Corona times, that it's very important to follow some of these things and have the knowledge of this. And hopefully this Corona time will inspire more people to look into this kind of things. So the way science is created, the basic narrative, physical science, or even science for that matter, in any field, is, you have something real. This is, again, I'm talking about the inductive knowledge, where you have, when you observe it regularly, then becomes common, becomes normal, standards, and then eventually it becomes ideal. And only under ideal conditions we should be able to make observations, which is in this case, in case of Indian tradition, it will be reaching to the level of Ishvara, where you are a Sakshi and you are detached and you're only making observation, and you have the intellectual capacity to put all these things together. So many of the current scientific ideas, including quantum, thermodynamics, genetics, evolution, equilibrium, etc., have reached the state of ideal to explain reality using this sequence. Whether that they have their own ideality here, but nevertheless they have reached to this level, and that's how they use. So science and society is at the crossroads. Science is an acceptable language. Like I said, society has issues which may have scientific solutions, and health has become a global issue. Health is one of the areas where scientific ideas are applied, particularly in today's world, because of the Corona time, that people are trying to understand how to use science to prevent their sickness. So I'm going to take a couple of examples to try to make my points of where science is and where the problems might be. The Darwin theory of evolution is one of the major ideas, scientific idea, for running for a couple hundred years, and it's still not very clear. There are some discussions, at least in the United States, whether creation is important or evolution is important. And there are random mutations. Science says that because of random mutation, there is a adaptability to the nature, and that is important, but we don't know why the random mutations occur. We don't know who causes them. Then there is a question of survival of the body and gene pools. When did this appear during the process of life on Earth? The survival of body and gene pool seems to be important. What is the origin of life? Is survival selfish? What about those who give their life for others? What is the evolutionary advantage to be selfless? Which is many of these ideas that comes in the Hindu traditions and the cultures and dharma traditions particularly. And for example, you will find that people like the Dalai Lama or Mother Teresa, who did not have any children, their gene did not survive, versus Osama bin Laden, who had 24 children. And so it will appear to be, from scientific point of view, Osama bin Laden more evolved than Mother Teresa and the Dalai Lama. That will look like it's ridiculous. And so then science has some problems. The problem is also very huge, because the life started for approximately 4 billion years ago, and then there are bacteria, viruses, all these have survived over a long period of time, animal, plants, and big animals, small animals, and human beings have been here in existence, according to science, only about 2 million years. So we have these, for example, coronavirus has advantage of about 4 billion years of evolution, whereas humans have only 2 million years. So then there is a huge gap in their ability to be able to deal with it. And so we get in trouble unless we understand that. So we need to appreciate that. That's again another Indian tradition of appreciating everything around us. They consider Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, in that everything comes. From virus to man, everything is in that process. And one of the criteria, although science used was to the size of the brain. They think that evolution occurred because of size of brain, as you can see here. And so their assumption, unspoken assumption, is man is most evolved. They use materialistic objects, and although there are some studies, sometimes people find that mind and intellect is also important, but generally they use mostly physical. And so they, like I already said, that they think about the mutation and adaptation is the way of evolution, and for example, brain size is one of the products. So you have this. I have to go to next. Yeah, this slide I wanted. So you can see this, when they use this total brain weight, and they find that actually on the top comes out to be elephant, not human being. So then they used another criteria that, they said that, well, elephant is too big. So they said brain weight as a percentage of the body weight. And so, of course, elephant came to be towards the end, last. But then human didn't come at top anyway. There is a animal called shrew, which is in Indian context, it'll be like chachundar type of animal. And that came out to be the top. So obviously that's not acceptable. And so then they use this another idea called encephalization factor. This is all defined, this is all human created, because we have the deductive idea that human is on the top, so we figure out somehow to make it happen. And in that case, of course, then is brain weight divided by the body weight to the power of 0.69, and then we are at the top. And so this is the kind of thing that science creates. And then I want to go back quickly to see that one of the ideas is genetics. And based on genetics, you will find that human genome is only 3 billion base pairs. Bacteria is only 5 million base pairs. But the bacteria uses 80% of the gene. Humans use 80% of the DNA for gene, and human uses only 1.4% of the DNA for gene. So if you look at the efficiency, you will find bacteria to be better. Similarly, humans have 30,000 genes, whereas plants have 50,000 genes. Even mouse has 50,000 genes. And if you look at the onion, has 6 times more DNA, and fish is like a tiny plant which has 3,000 times more DNA than human beings. So if you really look at the conditions, science does not exactly fit. Bacteria have a lot more advantage, 4.6 billion fold genetic life cycle advantage over human evolution. And human body has more bacteria. There are 100 trillion bacteria compared to 20 trillion of our own cells. So we are more bacteria than human beings. When I look at this, then this whole concept of evolution does not fit within the science. There is a conflict. I'm not talking about creation versus evolution. It's just the scientific nature itself is not fitting that well. And so we need to do more research on this. And one of the research is that actually the Darwin himself used this, and he found that when he found an observation made by a gardener, ordinary person who made research, that's very, very common. Like I said, local people make better observation than I, as a scientist, will try to say something about some area that I've never been and I don't know. What he found that if you in a little plot you grow 4 types of grass, they all grow more and they all produce more than if you grow only one. So the power of diversity is very important. There is a force in diversity. When we accept everything, everybody, and then work with them, is so much better. So evolution is really more of diversity, not of individual, which is what I think our problem is. And this is something that, like when I said Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam concept of Indian dharma or traditions, then you will find that this will fit much better there, where you appreciate and accept everyone. My own of research, I wanted to just give an example of a couple of examples. One of them is that I work on botulinum neurotoxins, which is produced by Clostridium, which is at the bottom of the tree. Here, you cannot read this, but just take my word. And here, human beings are here, and it's able to travel all through this and affects us. Many of you probably don't know what botulinum neurotoxin is. And when I was introduced and then was difficult to even say what botulinum is because not too many people know about this. But a lot of people know about Botox. So this is really same as the Botox, and it affects human being. At this point, that's all I want to say. But I want to talk about a little bit about this molecule. This molecule is a very long lasting. It has a half-life of 2,000 hours, 2,000, so 8,000 hours, compared to many other proteins that's in our body. Actually, there is no external protein ever active as long as this is active. So I'm just going to take out the biochemistry part is not that important. What I wanted to show is that my lab found that this is able to survive that long, probably because it's very flexible. So it is very tight structure, and here is very flexible structure. It's called molten globule, and this, because of this flexibility, is active and also most likely survives. So this is again the criteria of evolution, and my group has done that. It says flexibility creates dynamics, and that is the one which is part of evolution. So again, we have to be flexible, means we have to be accepting to others, and then we be able to do that. So Jain thoughts this will be considered as a one of the agamas, if in Indian tradition, and they talked about that the life starts with karma, and karma is a vibration. When the things vibrate, which is what I'm just trying to show earlier, that because of dynamics is related to vibration or movement, and that is how the life starts. And to sustain life, you have to have that. In Vedic literature, they talk about, in Nasadiya Suktam, they also talk about the vibration or oscillation that starts life. So using this concept, one could understand the evolution much better than the concept that people have put together so far about the brain size or genetics. And that's one of the areas of our research, trying to understand from the very beginning, when they call about Big Bang, when the molecules and atoms started, and to today, what molecules we have here, it is all consisting with that vibration or the karma from Jain's theory, or Nasadiya Suktam of oscillations and vibrations from Vedic literature. So that is how you can connect science to today. I'm just going to skip these things. Some of you probably will know, because I want to make another point before I end, and I'm coming towards the end. So I am going to skip this idea of panchakosa, which also can be used. And this is a funny art slide, so maybe you like to look at this just for a minute. When Einstein was trying to explain what is theory of relativity, which is basically the game of mind. And he gives an example: when a man sits with a pretty girl for an hour, it seems like a minute, but let him sit on a hot stove for a minute, it will be longer than any hour. And he actually published this. It's a create that it's the mind which creates the knowledge, and however we accept. But I wanted to have another aspect of it, which I'm going to skip several of these slides, to talk about this Vaiseshika philosophy, where this talks about matter or substance or dravya. And it has matter in modern chemistry has 118 elements, and it has energy, and it makes the compounds and everything that exists in this world where we see that. But dravya has 9 elements, which of course it has panchabhutas, the prithvi, the apa, the tejas, the vayu, the akash, but it also has kala and this, or space, which is I talked about earlier, des and kal. And then it also has the self and mind. This is something that is not in modern science. So people are now more and more integrating. I just wanted to show you one example of botulinum toxin that I work with. So botulinum toxin is very dangerous. This is most toxic substance. It is 100 billion times more toxic than cyanide. When people get this, it is a food poisoning disease. People get into the ventilators, and they are not like Corona time into 14 days. They are there for 6 months. Very, 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 very effective molecule. But the same molecule is also as Botox, which makes people look prettier. It removes the wrinkles. And the difference is that you have 100 picogram versus 100 nanograms. It's 1,000 times less space when you give it. It becomes toxic. when you have 1,000 times more space for the molecule, then it becomes a beauty. And this I'm just trying to show here. This applies to human beings, if a nice office versus a crowded office. And this is not even, it's only one person versus 4%. Just think about 1,000-fold. If 1,000 people were in this office, obviously that will be toxic. And this is true for everything, including salt. When people eat 10 times or 100 times more salt, they will die. So this idea of dharma and padarthas and this whole idea of dravya, guna, karmas, samanya, and visesa, all this philosophy comes from Indian darshanas, that's Vaiseshik darshana, and that explains in modern science behavior of things. So much complicated. Again, I'm sorry getting back to the complication stuff, but life is not that simple. This is the basis of Ayurveda, which involves all this Atma, Man, Panchabhutas, and Trigunas and everything, and then tells you Bat, Pitta, and Kaph, and that's how we keep our health. And this is based on technology, and this is last part of my presentation. I'll take a couple of minutes. That ancient technology, which is herbal chemistry. And the technology is something that you can see in Delhi's pillar, iron pillar that does not rust, which is a treatment of this iron with a lot of herbal extracts. And that makes it, for 1,500 years, it's not rusted. The same technology is used in Ayurveda, and that is called the Bhasma technology, which is nothing but the process yields something called nanoparticles. This is also exactly herbal treatment, herbal extract treatment. And you can just see that this is an electron micrograph where you can see just like clouds, there's tiny particles, and they have same kind of compositions with some differences. And then we have, my lab is working in this area. Because of this is heavy metal, chemists consider heavy metals, for example, even this, in this case is silver, as a toxic thing. So this has been banned. There have been a lot of papers published. And part of the reason I started working in this area was that when I heard that many people approached me. And so they have found that Ayurvedic Bhasma actually should be banned. It's actually still banned in here, but it is a most ancient application of nanomedicine. Nanomedicine is an example only for the last couple of decades. And Bhasma actually does not mean ash. It means something that has been made, the intensity has been removed, or in Sanskrit it will be nistej. And Bha means chamak, tej, or prachand. Ma means to stop it. So when it's toxicity, basically to remove its toxicity is the process called Bhasma. And if you make that, this is a student who did PhD with this, and she found that Bhasma is not toxic at all, even though everybody thinks that it is toxic. And it's only Bhasma is not toxic. If you make nanomaterials out of silver, regular nanomaterial today that chemistry knows how to make it, that is toxic, but the Bhasma is not toxic, even though it looks similar. So we have found that it is a very good bioenhancer. It enhances the availability of drugs that you give Bhasma with. So this has a positive implication, and it has not only positive implication that it could be used to enhance the economic activity in India, especially because this does not require a whole lot of so-called rocket science. It does not require rocket science. It is something that anybody, a middle schooler, can do that. And actually, it can enhance the rural India's agriculture sector contribution to the economic activity, where the rural areas can feel much better because they have a lot of plants. The reason I'm saying rural areas because they have a lot of plants and they know about it. And actually, I learned so much about this from a person, Dr. Sastri, Bal Sudhakar Sastri, who is near Vijayawada. And I went and visited his lab, and he actually is not a chemist. He's not a scientist also. He's just a Jyotisachari, believe it or not. But he read Sanskrit a lot, and he found in the Sanskrit texts what is the meaning of certain sutras, and then he was able to use this to make this nanomaterial. And so it's so amazing to have this, and I thought I will share that that idea with you. This is his organization. My institution is part of it. We have signed an MOU with them, and I work with them. So I am going to not talk about this. Is just um, something about Sanskrit, but the point I wanted to say that knowledge, fundamental knowledge, comes from thinking, from meditation, from sadhana, and then that gets experimentally tested. And we are talking about nigamas. That is how the practice has to be, the scientific understanding, and then material manifestation that we see today. And this is how I think Indian system of knowledge, Indian science, the Vedic knowledge system, that is science or can be approached as science, or that approach can be used to improve science, can be practiced today. I think I would like to stop at this point and see if there are some questions. I did take a few minutes longer than I wanted to take, but I thought I will stop at this point and see if Chandra, you have any questions from audience that I can address. Thank you very much.
So thanks a lot, Dr. Bal Ram Singh. It's a very captivating talk. And he covered so many topics, and I think each of them deserves a separate talk on its own to go into more details. And especially one other thing that stood out for me was how sometimes a common man's or local people's observations can be more accurate than even a scientist who spends the whole time there. And in the process, probably he kind of fixates on something and try to come up with all kinds of assumptions to prove that it is true.
Very true. Very, very true. And I think it is so much true even in today's world. I am a professor, but if I didn't have students who made some observations, interesting observations, even the one I said that my lab discovered this, it is discovered by a student, who we didn't know. I didn't know that that's why it's going to happen. He didn't know either. But when he did the experiments, he found, and then we built based on that. So it's always local. It's always local. Its focus has to be done, and that has been a very much a practice in Indian culture, where even Upanishads are the answers to questions of the students who obviously knew something but didn't know something else, and the teacher would not have written or spoken about it unless the questions were asked. So it is so important to have everything local. And this system is very important, not only in the scientific level, but culturally also, the socially also, economically also. Indian whole tradition is built around this idea of everything has to be inductive way of doing everything, and then building everything, and then they won't, like I said, whatever is written in Bhagavad Gita, now you can trace back, but only if you build up. You go down only after you build it up. You do not go down from top somewhere. Just don't. लोग बोलते हैं आसमान से कोई नहीं टपक पड़ता है. You always have to be from the ground up, and then you have to go down.
And that's where actually connected very nicely the concept of diversity and being able to question everything and anything, and be receptive to the questioning and diversity and the multiple thoughts. And that's where obviously so many of thought processes evolved in India on the spiritual side also, not just
Absolutely.
not any single god, single thing.
To recognize every individual, I mean, I didn't talk about that, and there is a more, I don't want to call it religious tradition, because religion is very different than dharma, the way I explain it, and I explain it many places. But the point is that we do accept everybody to be Brahm, as an example, because Yat Pinde Tat Brahmane, Aham Brahmasmi, means it's true for everyone. So if I have that idea, I must accept that you are also that, and then I will have respect for you, because then I'm just going to be interacting with you in the sense of being equal, even though you may be asking a question from very different point of view, and maybe even telling me something from very different point of view. But this acceptance of this idea of conversation evolves into knowledge system that is more diverse, obviously, and then it becomes more sustainable as well.
Yeah, and let's see if there are any questions. And meanwhile, I think also you brought up one more interesting topic on Darwin's theory, how once they have some assumption, try to prove by coming with all kinds of formulas, than trying to say what is really true versus we made up something, so we need to prove that that is true now.
That's true, very true as well. So that I think that is basically based on the ahankara, but we think that I am the great, and everybody I am means like human being. Now we think as humans we are the great because we are the one who is sitting and making judgment about others, and so we somehow have, once we made this theory, then now we have to fit it everything in there. And so we have the brain size, then we had the brain and body size, and then it didn't work, then let's have some other formula. So to be there, but actually when all this thing is being done, the basis of this is supposed to be genetics. And now genetics doesn't fit also. I mean, the fern, which is like not even full plant, has 3,000 more DNA than we do. And then not only that, actually in Ayurveda, I didn't have time to elaborate this. Ayurveda believes in all the problems start with the gastric system. So in the gastric system, what you have is microbiome. And the microbiome now is recognized to be the most important observation about health, because the bacteria that are present in our gut are very important. They control not only our body's physiology, but they also control our brain. This is well known now in science. So that is becoming, in Ayurveda, it is always considered that. And it's interesting that we have 100 trillion cells in our body. If they somehow decide one day to leave us, we will not survive the whole day. The day will be, at the end of the day, we will be gone. And actually we are more bacteria, and we think that we are in charge. But it's like my house telling me that my house is more important because in front of my house there is a number written, my name may be written. But actually I am the one who is more important, which is the bacteria who lives in the house. So there is so much bacteria living in our house, at least 5 times more. We are 80% bacteria, only 20% us. And bacteria controls our brain, controls our body and everything. So I don't know why would we say that we are more evolved? I mean, we really should be more grateful. And if we approached even corona today with that kind of humility, I think we will have much better outcome of the corona. We need to learn there are so many aspects of it, of course. Even this scientific aspect of corona, we need to learn, and then we need to avoid it rather than be confronted. That we are trying to come up with this drug and that drug and all that kind of stuff. It just overcomes all that. So we can just be careful, not get too much into the exploitation of the environment, because then you get too close to animals. It is living in animals that gets onto you, and then you get in trouble. So if you just avoided, kept yourself to your area and not exploited too much, probably corona will not be there. At least problem will not be there. But that recognition has to come from inside, that with the knowledge, not just because somebody said so. It should be really realization, and the science can provide that realization and explanation to people.
So one other quick question I have, Bal Ram Singh, is I know given your background in chemistry and biotechnology and all that thing, the focus was more on that. But also, I mean, as a very layman, I keep hearing about, say, for example, Pushpak Viman and flying technology in our shastras. So have you done any work on that area? Can you comment?
Yeah, this is one of the area that people again claim all kind of things. The time is huge. The one thing we need to know that over a period of time we don't know what they knew, what they didn't know, what was available, what was not available. I know that from here, from where you were sitting in California, right? No, you're sitting in Dallas.
Yeah.
So, but Padmaja is sitting in California, and Gadadhar is sitting in Bangalore. And when I get calls from India, they say, "Good evening, sir," when it's really just morning. So sometimes I'm sure you have probably seen the same behavior, because they expect, because everybody we say good evening, then you also say good evening. Okay, I can say good evening, good, of course, no problem, because that's their situation. But it is morning here. They are wrong about it. So sometimes this distance makes things wrong. I'm just point I'm trying to make, that we just do not know what was that. What they know as a Pushpak Viman, I have no idea. I did start some research on that when I was at the University of Massachusetts. Actually, before Bhasma, our research was more on trying to find out technology. And Pushpak Viman was one of them in the literature written. And I had a PhD in Sanskrit postdoc who worked on this for 3 years. And what we have found about that is that there are 72 types of materials mentioned about Pushpak Viman. And all we can know at this point about 8 or 9 of them as to what they are. Because my simple question was that if Pushpak Viman existed, why don't we make it now? It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be that great, just maybe let's just make today, just make it. You have a technology, just make it. So the answer to me was that we do not know 64 of those items written in there as to what they are. For example, today I'm calling about botulinum. Most people don't know what botulinum is. And if I wrote so much about it, it's $8 billion industry, going to be $50 billion industry. And, it treats 800 diseases. But somebody someday doesn't know what botulinum is, means nothing to that person. So I think we have lost. If Pushpak Viman, I tend to believe that if they have written, it's probably true. But I always, as a scientist, I like to verify, and that's what I try to do. And I got stuck where we only know 8 of the 72 items mentioned to make it. So I think the best thing would be to do more research on it. I have a feeling that just like we do all kind of things as possible, that is certainly possible to find out. There are some things about it is known, which is kind of meets with the requirements of what might have been. For example, the mercury as an energy source. So that is very well known. Mercury is the only matter that exists both solid and liquid. And it will be much easier. There is so much energy that you can create. And that has been one of the areas of the discussion from technology point of view. The other one is, like I said, is what matter has been involved in making it. But there is, unfortunately, from Indians' perspective, that either there is a claim to perfectness or there is nothing. It's all or none phenomenon, which is contrary to what I just presented. There should be a diversified view of, people should, some people do not want to accept. That's okay. That's fine. Some people want to believe it. This really existed. That's okay too. But there is a middle path where people should examine, and the science should examine. Before even Pushpak Viman, there is a Ram Setu. Has been said so much about it. That is what built, and this and human built or not built, and there is so much controversy, so much politics about it. We haven't really done serious research on that, because if we do research, because that's the time frame we are talking about, we will learn so much more. If we just like this Bhasma technology, how the Bhasma starts. You're supposed to take the metal, put in Gomutra, and then a lot of people will have problem. Why you're putting in Gomutra? Now there is a mantra about putting this in the Gomutra. You have to say this mantra for so many times. What does that mean? Now go in chemistry, and I am talking about here in my university, my department, we sat down together and we translated it in chemistry. Putting in Gomutra means nitrogen source. Saying so many mantras means so much for incubation for so long. It's nothing to do with mantra. Mantra may be useful for those who do mantras, but it was so easy to say so many mantras you do, and then that means that long you have. Then after that, it's supposed to put in gobar. So what is that? Because gobar has a very rich source of sulfides, which is very important part of making nanoparticles, making things nanoparticles, as well as making non-reactive. So this translation needs to be done, and only by knowledge you can know, only by appreciation of the knowledge. So be appreciated the knowledge. That's why we are able to create today Bhasma, and actually we filed 2 patents on it, because it's very, not because we want to make a lot of money out of it, but because we want to prove to people it's worth something. And then people will say, oh yeah, maybe Bhasma is good, because otherwise Bhasma is like either ash or it's toxic material you want to keep it away from. But actually it's a wonderful creation that was known at least a couple thousand years, and the science only knows for a couple of decades. So I think there is if I were to approach Pushpak Viman, I think I would approach with solid research, a lot of labor, a lot of science that scientists have to get involved, and a lot of geologists, a lot of chemists, a lot of physicists and technologists. They have to really think through it and get to the last bit of whatever that is said in the literature, and then look at it that way.
So basically, there is a lot of science behind our customs to make it easy for common man to follow. So
I don't know. I don't know whether I want to say it blindly like that, but given the fact that it comes from the inductive point of view and a lot of observations, it certainly has some scientific component in it. I'm not saying that there is no blind faith in it too. Also, sometimes people do, and for variety of reasons, because the people would like to take advantage of it. As you and I both know that if there is something that is useful to people, then there is a price to pay, and there is somebody to make money out of it. So this I think we should not forget this aspect of it whenever we are looking at the science.
yeah. So we don't have any questions at this point, Balramji. There's just one comment from Shashi Tiwari. A scholar of science can better understand ancient scientific ideas. This talk is its evidence.
I know
So,
Sati Tiwari ji. She's a nice colleague. I know her. She's,
okay.
she's a Sanskrit professor, retired Sanskrit professor from Delhi University.
So I really want to thank you, and uh, I definitely see each of these topics can be deserve its own lecture to go into more details.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, and we will be happy to continue
And
our.
and I have a quick announcement regarding the next week's talks, and then we'll conclude here. So next week we have two more talks. The first one is on November 7th, Saturday, on Vedic management by N. Gopal Krishnan ji. And on November 8th, Sunday, we have another talk, Introduction to Manusmriti by Uttara Nerurkar. So that's all for today's session, and please subscribe to the channel and follow for our the next set of talks. Thanks a lot once again. Hari Om.